Kayla's was very active in her Best Buddies chapter in college at Southern Connecticut State University. And she's also now a speech pathologist, and she works with kids of all abilities. So she's going to tell us a little bit about her career path and how Best Buddies has shaped her. So we're really excited. Thank you for coming, Kayla.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Thank you, Katie, for organizing all of this. So yeah, like Katie said, I'm Kayla Benedetto. I'm 26. I'm going to be 27 in 2 months. I cry about it every night. But I am a speech and language pathologist. The way I kind of found my career path and my passion is kind of not, it's not like super traditional, but I'll like talk a little bit more. I put together a little slideshow. I sent it to Katie. There's some links and stuff, some information in here. So if by the end, you find that speech pathology is really something that you would consider going into as a career path, I'm sure I would be more than welcome to email it out. I also have my email at the end. So if you ever have any questions moving forward, you can shoot me an email and I'll be happy to help you out. So just a little bit about me. I have a Bachelor of Science in Communication Disorders. I graduated in 2016. I minored in psychology as well, so I have that little bit of a background. Going back, the reason why I decided to get into speech pathology in the first place was, like Katie said, we didn't have a Best Buddies organization in my high school, but we did have unified theater and unified sports. We also had a self-contained classroom of students with special needs and students with IEPs, and they also had an activity center. So they had job opportunities right on campus at our high school. They like printed napkins and pencils for events for people. So I volunteered there. I was very active with Unified Theater, and I was looking to go into special education. And I realized teaching wasn't really for me. I wanted something a little bit more specialized, and I was really into psychology too, and neurology and cognition and all of that fun stuff in the brain. And autism has always been a huge interest of mine. So that's kind of how I landed on speech pathology in high school. And I was really lucky that I went to a school with a really great communication disorders program where I was able to it was a nice, simple transition from high school to college to graduate school. I started Best Buddies when I was a freshman in 2012, and I went all the way through my 4 years. Unfortunately, they don't allow graduate students to participate at my school. I also got my master's degree at Southern as well. But my best buddy and I have stayed in touch. We're still really good friends. I have a picture of him on the next slide. He's adorable. And so, like I said, now I'm a speech and language pathologist. I work in public schools, but there are lots of different settings that speech and language pathologists can work in, which I'll kind of go into in a little bit. So here is me and my best buddy. That's Dylan. Dylan and I like really hit it off. We bonded over our love for Law and Order SVU and Glee. Dylan really we always talked about how Glee was such a great show because it showcased an actor with the same disability as him. I don't know if anyone's seen Glee. It's more like a high school show for me. You guys were probably young when it was on. But so him and I love to talk about Glee and musical theater. And we had a really great time. And like I said, we still text every now and again. The group home that we were collaborating with was Chapel Haven in New Haven, Connecticut. And his jobs rotated, and he was working in the cafeteria and the daycare at Yale University. So I was really lucky. Our Best Buddies program was awesome. It had been around for such a long time, and the Chapel Haven program was just excellent. So I'm going to try to be I absolutely love my job. I tell people I have the best job in the whole world. I'm going to try not to be super obnoxious and dry. I'm just going to try and give you some info, and then we can open it up after if you guys have any questions. So I am licensed to be a speech and language pathologist. You do need a graduate degree, and you need to be licensed through the American Speech Language Hearing Association, as well as whatever state you're in, their Department of Public Health. If you want to work in public schools, you also need a certification, teacher certification as well. Some schools offer that within their master's program. Mine did. So I just kind of streamlined, with my master's degree, I also got my teaching certification. Some schools don't do that. It just would require you to take an extra exam at the end. So yes, this is a very dry definition that I copy and pasted from the ASHA website. But basically what speech and language pathologists do are professionals who diagnose, assess, treat any area of communication and cognition that falls within our scope of practice. Again, it requires a master's or postdoc degree or PhD or clinical doctorate to practice. And then you need to pass the board exam, complete 400 contact hours. I wrote it on one of these slides. I'm a little disorganized. So yes, you have to pass the exam, graduate with a master's degree. I forgot what I said, 400 practicum hours, and most programs are 6 full-time credits. Oh my God, 6 full-time semesters, over 60 credits. So it's quite rigorous, but definitely worth it. So service delivery areas, kind of our scope, the type of disorders or individuals that we treat include fluency patients, so kids who stutter. I have a couple kiddos who stutter now, ranging in age and ranging in cognitive functioning. So like I have a 4th grader who's above grade level on everything, but he's like super aware of his stutter, so he can really conceptualize like some of those skills. Whereas I have a 5th grader who his cognitive functioning is quite low, so he has a really difficult time kind of understanding what stuttering even is and when he's even doing it. So that's just kind of a roadblock that you hit with clients who stutter. And fun fact, whenever you hear like speech therapy, most people think like, oh, you treat people who stutter. But stuttering is actually the least prepared, or the area where speech pathologists feel least prepared when they graduate grad school. Just a little fun fact. We also treat speech production, like articulation and motor planning. So kind of like those productions of sounds. Spoken and written language, which is a huge broad umbrella, but that includes listening, processing, speaking, reading, writing, and pragmatics, which is social communication. I'm not sure if anybody here also is very interested in autism spectrum disorder, but autism spectrum disorder is a disorder of social pragmatic communication. So a lot of our kiddos that we see with autism also need speech and language support because of the difficulty with pragmatics of language. So this includes, I see kids for vocabulary, syntax, and morphology. We work on, putting sentences together, using verb forms, pre-linguistic communication. So in infants, floor time, all different kinds of play activities, that kind of falls under our umbrella as well. We also work with individuals working on cognition. So this includes not only children, but also adults. I mean, I should preface that this is a broad umbrella. Our scope of practice goes from birth to death. We can see patients from the time they're born to the time they take their last breath. So me personally, just working with children and being in public school, I do work on attention, memory, problem solving, and executive functioning skills with some of my kiddos. Executive functioning, again, kind of ties in with autism. It's a very high level thinking and planning skill that's controlled by your frontal lobe. A lot of kids with autism have difficulties with that. But I love doing therapy in that area because it's very high level. And when you see improvements in those kiddos, you see a lot of responsibility and independence, which is a lot of fun. There are some speech pathologists that also treat voice disorders. So a lot of patients with Parkinson's disorder or disease have a difficult time with their loudness level and their pitch variation. A new area of the field that I'm not sure if anyone here would be interested in, but there's a lot of research coming out that speech pathologists are working with transgender clients who are looking to change the pitch variation of their voice, which I think is super cool. Voice is something that's not like a big passion of mine, but that's a really cool and like upcoming, like smidge little area of the field. We also work on feeding and swallowing. When I was in graduate school, I worked in a inpatient pediatric hospital. And I worked with like 18-month to like 3-year-olds doing feeding and swallowing therapy, which was really, really cool. Very difficult, but awesome. And also auditory habilitation and rehabilitation. So anything to do with speech, language, communication, and listening skills impacted by hearing loss or deafness. I currently have a kiddo on my caseload at school who wears hearing aids. So, I check in with him every day with his hearing aids and his hearing equipment. I consult with the teachers and any other staff in the building, any of the kids, because, most schools don't have an audiologist in the building. So we kind of help out with the audiologist. And there's a link there if anyone, gets this and is really interested, like really wants to do speech pathology, you can check out the scope of practice there. So there's a ton of different settings that speech paths can work in. Like I said, I work in a pre-K to 5 school, but you can work early intervention, so birth to 3, either in a hospital, in home care, any sort of inpatient facility, preschools, public schools, colleges or universities as a professor. A lot of my colleagues from grad school and my good friends work in healthcare. They work in hospitals like acute care, rehabilitation centers, even psychiatric hospitals. I also know a few of my supervisors who had gone into juvenile detention centers and done evaluations and therapy for some of the children that were in juvenile detention centers, which is pretty interesting. And also residential and non-residential healthcare facilities like a skilled nursing home. A lot of times with that population, the geriatric population, it's more so feeding, swallowing, and, oral care, some memory and executive function and attention stuff as well. We've seen patients who have gotten traumatic brain injuries, had strokes, and have aphasia or some kind of word finding difficulty. That's another, that's just the setting that you're going to get the most exposure to working with geriatric populations are in healthcare. There are also private practices, which I've worked in private practice. They're a lot of fun. They're really great. And also government like local or federal government agencies, such as public health departments, or even in the military. So, like I said, I'm a school speech pathologist. This is like super obnoxious with the bullet points, but this is kind of what I do in a day-to-day. So a lot of my responsibilities, I have so many kids on my caseload. Currently, I have about 30. Each kid has an individualized education plan or an IEP. Kids who qualify for special education, after you go through the assessment process, you realize that they may have difficulties in speech and language. They would qualify for an IEP. Whatever it says on the IEP, it's a legal document. So I would write goals and objectives for that child to hopefully master within the year. I usually see my kids about 1 hour a week. With COVID, it's been very interesting. So last, from March to June, we were fully virtual. This year, our students had the opportunity to be fully virtual or be full-time in person. So I've kind of been going back and forth. Most of my kids are back in school. It's very difficult wearing masks, though, working on speech and language skills. We do have clear masks. I have to say they're very claustrophobic. They make me feel very claustrophobic, so I don't like to push them on the kids. But yes, it's definitely difficult with the masks. But at least we're all in person, and majority of them are in person, and a lot of my kiddos are making progress, which is great. So I do a lot of fun activities, and try to work on those goals and objectives. My favorite part of the job actually is conducting evaluations. I really like to get a kid, he's been referred through special education and there's concerns with X, Y, and Z. I really like to put the puzzle pieces together and, take that kid. I'd never seen this kid before and really, test them, get down to the nitty gritty, find out what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then go from there and plan their program as well. Okay, I'm sorry. If I'm going too fast for anybody, please tell me. Just let me know. Stop me at any point if you have questions. So like I said, graduate school, I don't want to scare anybody. It is a very competitive field. Oh my God, the chat is blowing up. I'm so sorry. I haven't even been reading. Oh, Glee. Okay, yes. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Sam. Yes, Glee is a great show. It's one of my favorites. But grad school is pretty rigorous. It is fairly competitive to get into. Majority of schools have about a like 20 to 30% acceptance rate. That's to say, like, I was terrified going through undergrad. I'm like, oh my God, my grades aren't good enough. My GRE scores aren't good enough. I don't do enough extracurriculars, X, Y, and Z. But here I am now. I'm a speech pathologist and I got accepted into grad school. So it's not impossible. You can do it if this is your passion and this is something that you're interested in. You can totally do it and succeed. So, like I said, it's about 6 full-time semesters. You have to do 400 contact hours. Something that I will mention is it is important if you're looking at graduate schools to see whether or not they have an on-campus clinic. So Southern has a very well-developed on-campus clinic because the program's been around for so long. So I was very lucky to get a lot of my contact hours on campus with clinical supervisors on campus, whereas another school that I had applied to, they didn't have an on-campus clinic and all of your clinical practicum hours were at different sites. So they're all at schools or hospitals. And which we do have that opportunity as well. We just get that after we've had in my school was 3 semesters of on-campus clinical practicum before we went off campus. And then you have to complete some sort of research thesis or capstone project, and then pass the national praxis exam, which isn't that scary. I put here just a list of universities in Massachusetts because I know you guys are at Tufts. But here's a state-by-state list if anyone's interested of all the schools that offer a master's program in speech pathology. And here are some related fields. I'm like kicking myself because I can't believe I didn't put audiology because we're like one and the same. ASHA certifies both speech pathologists and audiologists as well. But occupational therapy, physical therapy, special ed, child psychology, developmental pediatrics, applied behavioral analysis. These are all kind of related fields that I work with all these professionals. I've worked with all these professionals. Social work as well. So
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
What did you do your thesis on?
So I actually did a thesis in my undergrad. Because I was in the honors program, and it wasn't required for the communication disorders department. It was required for that. So I did a survey about the openness and willingness of typical college students to interact with same age peers on the autism spectrum. I got very few participants. And I like ran it through, I tried to compare, gender, age. The only like really statistical significance was that students who were in like health and human services, like in my field or in special ed, were a little bit more open and willing to interact with other college students with autism, as opposed to like business or physics majors. I actually had one participant say on the survey, I have high functioning autism and I hate interacting with people. And if someone came up to me and said they had autism, I wouldn't interact with them. I was like, okay, well, at least you're being honest. And I disseminated the survey to another university that has a program specifically for students with high functioning autism. I got 4 responses. So data is not really reliable, but it was a great experience. And then for my master's, I did a capstone project on a patient that I had at the hospital who was doing feeding therapy. She was, oh my gosh, I can't even remember. She was 2 years old, and she was only eating like purees and liquids. So we were working on meltable solids like puffs, Oreo cookies, things like that, and kind of measuring how much she would take, how often she would feed herself, and kind of collaborating with the OT and stuff like that. So yeah, it was very interesting.
So with the thesis project, were you able to like get enough data in the end to create a consensus, or?
No. I only had 75 participants. So there were no like statistical significances across, participants and across different groups. But like I said, I'm not a statistician. I cannot do numbers at all. So that whole process of like gathering the data was absolutely brutal. But the whole like beginning part, like actually doing the research, and, writing the whole background portion and doing all the research and stuff was a lot of fun, and like talking to other professionals in the field.
How did you define like willing to interact? I'm out of curiosity.
That's a great question. And it's been please forgive me, it's been 5 years. It's been 5 years since I've done that. And I try to like put it out of my mind because it was a crazy time. I think we used like a Likert rating scale, and we did, I really cannot remember. However, if you're interested, I could send it to Katie and have her send it to whoever's interested if you want to look. It's completed, it's done, it's like 50 pages. If it's, some light reading on your spring break or summer vacation. With the special ed population in middle school and high school, I was really active in unified theater. Any sort of unified anything, I did volunteer work. And I was really looking at special education, but I realized that teaching in like with a big group might not really be my thing. I wanted to be a little bit more specialized. And I really liked psychology and neurology and communication. I'm not sure if anyone's into astrology, but I'm a Gemini, and Geminis are ruled by communication, or like the sign of language and communication. So it makes sense. But I really liked all of that. And I've always been really interested in autism spectrum disorder as well. So because autism is a disorder of communication, I figured this would be my best opportunity to be able to work with that population. I'm not sure if anyone else is interested in autism, but I'm currently getting trained in the ADOS-2, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. So that's like the gold standard in diagnosing autism. I started it last year and then COVID hit. So it was put on hold, but now we're back doing training. And by the end of this school year, I'll be fully trained and can diagnose autism according to the ADOS. So that's a really, anyone, like I said, if anyone's interested in autism, that's a really cool thing to look up.
What is that process like the getting certified to do like the ADOS assessments? Is that like within your like major or degree specifically, or can anyone do that training?
That's a great question. So technically anybody who works in related fields can get certified. So a lot of the times child psychologists or school psychologists will administer the ADOS. But speech and language pathologists, social workers, teachers, OTs, PTs, anyone who works in the related field can get training in it. But I believe you do need to be like a certified professional in the field to do that. It's like not difficult at all to sign up. Like anyone can sign up. Where I take it through like a RESC, like a regional education center, and the woman who runs it is phenomenal. And it's just like a 5-part training. She teaches you how to, because it's not like a standardized assessment. It's all observation based and play based. So you have to really manipulate the environment to elicit the behavior that you're looking for. And then based the way in which they elicit that behavior, you then have to code it with like a coding system. So the test itself doesn't take long to administer. It takes like 45 to 60 minutes, but it's the coding and the scoring that takes a while, and you have to go back, watch the videos, listen to the recordings. So I'm excited to finally be able to administer it. I'm also super nervous, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. That was a good question.
Kayla, I just want to say thank you again so much for your presentation, everything you've shared with us. We're really, really appreciative of that. I was just wondering, what is your if you had to narrow it down, what's your favorite aspect of your job?
So thank you, Chris. I'm so happy to be here. I feel young again. It's so fun. My favorite aspect of the field is definitely working with kids on the autism spectrum. I love doing social language therapy. I love working with kids on the spectrum, identifying emotions on people, learning how to have a conversation. I love that. I also really am starting to get into assistive and augmentative communication. So that includes, iPads, lamp devices, picture exchange, any kind of nonverbal way for a child to communicate. It's a very complex area of the field. I've actually considered going back and getting certified in assistive technology. It's just more school and so much work, but it's really up and coming. And to get kids on iPads and how amazing technology is today, that like a little screen can be a child's voice, is just incredible. So that's also one of my favorite things to work on. One of my least favorite things. Do you want me to share one of my least favorite things to do?
Let's
I
hear it.
absolutely hate doing speech sounds. Like the actual like hallmark of my job, working on like articulation. It's very dry. It's very boring. I feel like anytime I'm in a session, these kids are like so irritated with me. They're like, I don't want to do the S sound anymore. I'm like, no, you need to keep doing the S sound. And I'm sitting here like, oh my God, I don't want to hear you do the S sound anymore either. So yeah, just a little bit of realness for everyone. It's not all sunshine and roses.
Kayla, again, thank you so much for being here. What is one piece of advice that you would give if anybody here is considering going into your field or a similar field? What's a piece of advice you would give them?
Oh, that's such a great question. My first piece of advice would be do it. Don't second guess yourself. Just go and do it. It takes a really special person to love this population. And clearly, if that's a passion for you, just like it is for me, you're in the right place. Just do it. Just don't give up, because it does get very daunting and very overwhelming. But like I said, it really takes a special person. And because this is something that you're passionate about and that you love, there's no way that you shouldn't be sharing this gift with the world. That's what I would say.
That's beautiful. Does anybody else have any questions for Kayla?
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Have you, like, during the pandemic, when your sessions went virtual, were you able to make progress, or how did that work?
Oh wow, a great question. So it depends on the kid, and it depends on the skill. So there were some kids that didn't access any virtual learning at all. So I was sending some kids I was literally like printing out worksheets, putting them in an envelope and putting a stamp on them and mailing them out. Families didn't have printers. So those kids, like, there was really no way to track progress until we got back. I do have to say, the kids that I was working on speech sounds with, they made some good progress, because at least I could go like all the way up to the camera and show them my mouth, which was great. And we didn't have to wear masks, so I could see their sound productions as well. So I would say for the most part, yes. The kids who, their families were able to get them on consistently, yes, but it was so difficult. It was so difficult. And, so I work for an elementary school, but my school is a magnet school. So our kids come from all different districts all over the state. So we have to work with individual school districts when we're qualifying a child for special ed. My supervisor describes it as like, we're the babysitters, and the district where they live is their parent. Like, they own that child. That's their child, and we're just the babysitters. So the districts that we were working with were super understanding, obviously, given the circumstances. Usually if, they see a child not making progress, then we need to make adjustments to their programming. But luckily, once we got back in school this fall, and, we're kind of able to do more consistent therapy and some progress monitors and whatnot, most of them got back on track. It's actually a really good question. I think I would have to say some of our typical friends were the ones that suffered the most. Any other questions? A lot of my job is sitting in meetings. It's really boring. That's also the not so fun part of it.
I have one quick question, if you guys can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I was just gonna ask for anyone like who's interested in. I know that you, Kayla, did like the communication disorders major at Southern, but Tufts doesn't have anything like that.
Mhm.
Like, do you think it matters what major? Like, would you do psych? Any recommendations for people who might be interested in
That's
that?
such a good question, Katie. So a lot of programs, a lot of master's programs will have different options. So I know at Southern, if you didn't have an undergrad in communication disorders or speech language and hearing science or whatever, speech pathology, whatever the field, whatever the major was titled, you could apply into the 3-year program instead of the 2-year program for your master's, where that first year you take all of your undergrad communication disorders classes, and then you go about, the rest of your 2 years as if you are like a regular grad student. Like I said, I know a lot of schools do offer that, which is great. I mean, I'm not sure what Tufts has for majors, but psychology is definitely great. If they have any kind of like special education, foreign language, because bilingual SLPs are very few and far between, and we're very needed. So if you're in any sort of foreign language, if you speak any language fluently, you're basically a shoo-in to get into grad school, but you didn't hear it from me. And yeah, job security is great. So I would say foreign language or psych would probably be the best.
Do you ever work with any type of like signed language? Because I'm taking sign language right now, and I know it's not like the production of sound, but it is like communication.
Mhm.
So I was wondering if speech language pathologists ever like come across or work with individuals who use sign language to communicate.
Yep, all the time. So I took a sign language class, oh my god, 2013, so like 8 years ago. I only took one class, unfortunately, but I learned a lot of basics. So I have a couple kiddos who are nonverbal, and we're working kind of on a total communication approach. They don't always verbalize. They can certain words, but not all the time. So I supplement with pictures and with sign as well. So like I have a kid who, we're working on putting together sentences, and we'll be reading a book, and he'll say, "I see," and then he'll tell me the word that he sees. And he just like, it's helpful for him to be able to supplement his verbal communication. And I want, those kind of like core words. In my setting, not so much, just because that's not really the population that we have, but in other settings as well. I know there are lots of speech pathologists that work. Actually, my district has a preschool program for children who are deaf or hard of hearing, who have cochlear implants and hearing aids and such. So, and I know they work with the audiologist very closely there. That's a really good question. You guys have really good questions. Anyone else? Like I said, my email is on the PowerPoint. If you ever have any questions, if you're thinking about speech pathology, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to chat, give you any info you might need.
Kayla, thank you so much. You were amazing. We learned so much.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure. Best Buddies is such an amazing organization. I'm sorry that it's, I'm sure it's virtual for you guys. Sorry that's not in person. You don't get to do all the fun pizza parties and social events and dances and such, but you guys are in a great club. It's such a great organization. Enjoy your time because it flies by. And if I give you any piece of advice, please try and keep in contact with your buddies. They really, it means so much to them, and it means so much to us too. So